I think there's a process for creating content, and it usually goes that you create some kind of outline, some kind of basic outline, and then you create a first draft, and then you edit that first draft so you have a more polished draft, and then you have something that's ready to publish. So you've got these stages, right? And I have this new word, which is AI draft, because I think there is a place for AI to write a draft. It's never anything you'd want to publish straight out. It's like pre-first draft, in my opinion. You get the AI draft, you get something you can work with, and then the human creates the actual first draft. The human needs to take what the AI writing tool creates and then put a human touch on it, and then build something that's an actual human created first draft.
Hello and welcome to Marketing Speak. I'm your host, Stephan Spencer. It's my pleasure to have Pamela Wilson with us. Pamela is a marketing advisor, executive coach, keynote speaker, and the founder of PamelaWilson.com. She's the author of 2 popular books on content marketing, Master Content Marketing and Master Content Strategy. Pamela, it's so great to have you on the show.
I am thrilled to be here, and boy, has a lot changed in the content marketing world, so I'm excited to talk about this.
Yeah, me too. I'm sure that our listeners dying to hear about how content marketing is evolving in the age of ChatGPT and everything, but we'll get to that. First, I want to ask you a bit about how you take the stuff that you're telling clients and followers to do in the world of content marketing and content strategy, and you apply it kind of boots on the ground for your own business or for a particular client that you're working on. Let's see how this actually gets executed on a day-to-day basis.
Yes. Well, my primary client right now is a business in the healthcare industry. They are using content to make a lot of money for their business because it's their primary way to reach prospects. And I'm serving as their chief marketing officer. So we've got written content, we've got video content. We are weaving AI into the entire content production process and finding ways to make it really useful, and yet create content that definitely sounds like it comes from a very smart human. So that's what I'm excited to get into.
Awesome. So when you say weaving AI, are you using tools like Jasper and Surfer SEO and things like that, or just using ChatGPT or some other specialized tools? Like how are you weaving AI into content production without it just kind of taking over and being a content farm courtesy of ChatGPT?
Yeah. I think one of the big challenges right now that we're all experiencing is that there are new tools every single week. There are new content writing tools. There are new image creation tools. They're just rolling out at a pace that none of us can even keep up with them. So I'm a big believer in choosing a piece of software and then like doubling down and really figuring out how to make the most out of that software before you bounce off and find something else, like a new shiny tool that you want to try. I think when we're always trying new tools, we don't have the opportunity to really optimize the results we get from any one of them, right? So that's the context for what I'm about to tell you, which is that we are really doubling down on ChatGPT. I don't think we've squeezed all the juice that we can get out of ChatGPT yet. I think there's a lot we can still explore. And they're adding, they've now added plugins. It's now able to search the web and give you real-time results. So there are so many things that ChatGPT can do, and we're still figuring out all the different ways we can use it. So that's the primary tool we're using right now. With the client I'm working with now, we have a content writer who's on staff, and she's full-time. And then we have a videographer who's also full-time. So we're very fortunate in that respect that we do have very smart human content creators as part of the team. So when we use AI, it's more of a supplement and a way to maybe generate ideas and get better, smoother sounding copy and video content. So It's mostly for that, but we can get into details about how it all works.
Yeah. In fact, I'd love to hear how ChatGPT helps with the video process of creating, well, first of all, ideating videos, topics, and things like that, and then turning that into a final piece of content for, let's say, your YouTube channel. How do you incorporate AI into that process?
So the way we work in this company is it's healthcare, so it's very jargon filled and technical in a way. It's really important because of the audience we're trying to do outreach to and the prospective customers for the business. We need to speak their language and we need to speak it competently and authoritatively. So what we're doing internally is we come up with a topic that we think will appeal to prospects. The model is set up that we bring prospects in through content. They talk to someone on a sales team, and the sales team closes, and that's where the conversion happens. So our primary goal with our content is to generate leads, qualified leads that go to the sales team. They're handed off, and the sales team kind of takes it the final leg of the journey, right? So what we're primarily doing is coming up with topics that we think will appeal to these people. And then we're finding keyword phrases, obviously, because we do still want to rank in search engines. But we're also focusing a lot on super long tail keywords, because when you're using any of these AI tools, the prompts generally contain like lots of different words that you can try to target. So we're using it for that. We create an article where the content writer is interviewing internal subject matter experts. So we actually have subject matter experts who work for the company who are very familiar with these business processes within this healthcare niche that we're trying to appeal to. She interviews them, gets lots of detailed information, and then turns that into a blog post. And where ChatGPT helps with all of that is she can do things like putting in the transcribed interview with the subject matter expert and having ChatGPT summarize it, pull out key points, give us ideas, not necessarily straight out headlines, but ideas for headlines. I always tell the content team that it's I want them to think about ChatGPT as a thesaurus on steroids. So I don't think that it's actually a writing tool. I've used some of the AI writing tools like Jasper and Write Sonic. I wasn't super impressed by the results, but if you think about them as a thesaurus that's basically just giving you ideas, phrases, and concepts that you can utilize as your human writes the content, I think that can be really interesting. So it's an assistant more than a source of content. Does that make sense?
Yep. I know that the prompt that you use makes a huge difference as far as the output that you get from ChatGPT. So what would be some of the lessons and nuances of prompt creation that you've learned in this process?
Right. The biggest thing that I learned is something that I think most of us know by this point, but it was news to me when I first learned it, which is telling ChatGPT a role that you want it to play. And you can get really creative with this. Like, for example, you are a highly paid, experienced copywriter in the healthcare industry, something like that. So you can actually tell it to play a role in its response back to you, and that can make a huge difference in the quality of the information that you get out of it.
Yeah, that's a great tip. What about getting to the limits of the amount of text that it will generate? How do you get around that? So it's going to output a certain amount of text and that's it. But you need more content than that for, let's say, an ebook that you want it to write. How do you get around that?
We haven't used it much for ebooks, to be honest. We're using it primarily for blog content, and we don't see a huge problem with those limits. There's always the please continue button, so you can just tell it to keep going, which is that's always an option. But I think, if you were doing ebooks, if you were creating an ebook and getting Chat GPT to create, it's funny, Stephan, I have this new word that I've been using lately, because when you create content, if you read my books, for example, I think there's a process for creating content, and it usually goes that you create some kind of outline, some kind of basic outline, and then you create a first draft, and then you edit that first draft so you have a more polished draft, and then you have something that's ready to publish. So you've got these stages, right? And I have this new word, which is AI draft, because I think there is a place for AI to write a draft. It's never anything you'd want to publish straight out. It's like pre-first draft, in my opinion. You get the AI draft, you get something you can work with, and then the human creates the actual first draft. The human needs to take what the AI writing tool creates and then put a human touch on it, eliminate things that are just not accurate or pertinent to the piece of content you're creating, streamline it, add in human touch things like emotion, stories, history, things like that, quotes from subject matter experts, and then build something that's an actual human created first draft. And I think I lost track of your question.
No, that's fine. Now I got another question related to that.
Okay.
How do you fact check or somehow validate what is being churned out by the large language model, because it's not always correct? It can easily lie to you.
Yes, totally. Yeah, it can go completely off the rails and just make stuff up, right? So honestly, we try to feed in facts. We try to feed it facts and ask it to interpret those facts, right? So we're giving it information based on our subject matter experts who actually do know what they're talking about. And they're giving us information that's based on data. So we're not depending on it to do any of that kind of work. I think that's too much to ask. AI means artificial intelligence. It's not smart like a human. It's artificial, right? Yeah. And that doesn't mean there's not a place for it, but I think we need to know what that place is, and we need to put it on the hierarchy below humans, frankly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I'm curious, do you get different results when you prompt it saying you are an expert, let's say content marketer, versus you're an expert content strategist? Have you tried comparing and contrasting what you get?
I haven't tried that one exactly, no. I mean, the thing is, typically, I wouldn't prompt it as a content strategist to write content. You know what I mean? The content strategist, that prompt would generally be about, what would you recommend for a website if you want it to rank for these terms? What are the kinds of content you could create to appeal to this audience member, this kind of thing. So it would be a strategy question more than a content creation question.
Which leads me to an unrelated to AI question here for you. Why two separate books about content marketing and then about content strategy?
Yes. Oh, that's a good one. So I wrote the first book because I became a content marketer with a very low confidence level in my writing. So I entered the marketing field I always tell people I came in through the design door. So I came into marketing as a graphic designer, publication designer. I was, designing ads, like designing the whole visual aspect of marketing for people. And as I learned about content marketing and I knew I wanted to use it, I had to somehow figure out how to write. If I ever needed writing on a project I was working on, I would hire a copywriter and bring them into the project. I wouldn't do the writing myself. So I just had no confidence in my writing ability. But I think partly because of my design background, I started to see a certain pattern in content that performed really well. I saw these elements that were always present in really great content. Part of it was because I started getting involved with Copyblogger. At that time, they were sort of industry leaders in terms of teaching content marketing to the world and demonstrating what good content marketing looked like. I started writing for Copyblogger and I based my posts on these 7 elements. I felt like I had unlocked some kind of like secret code that helped my content to do well, right? And as long as I included these elements, they accepted my posts and published them. And they eventually asked me to write for them every month, which was a big deal. It felt like being asked to perform at Carnegie Hall once a month or something, you know. And then they asked me to join their team eventually. So my mastery of content marketing opened a ton of doors for me. So I focused my first book on helping people to understand those elements and helping them figure out how to get content produced from start to finish, especially if content marketing was something they were doing like in addition to all the other things they had on their plates. So once I did that and taught people that, the questions started. And the questions were always things like, well, how often should I post content? And how can I create content that helps me to sell things online? And, you know, what's the overall structure that I should be looking at in terms of my content plans for the month, the quarter, the year? And I knew I needed to write a second book. So that was why the second one was all about strategy, because the second book assumes that you know how to create content. And it's all about like, okay, now you know how to create content. What are you going to do with it, right? How are you going to harness the power of content to boost the revenue in your business?
Yeah. So let's actually answer some of these questions that you just threw out there as part of these two books. So how often should our listener post to social media, to their blog, to their YouTube channel? What's ideal these days?
I hate answering questions with it depends. It does depend a little bit, but there are some rules of thumb, right? So one of the things that I talk about in the content strategy book is this concept of a website life cycle. And it's this idea that when you first bring your business online or you're first building up that presence with content, you really need to focus on publishing more often. And there are two reasons for that. One reason is just the more you publish, the more confidence you gain as a content creator. You just kind of get better content chops, right? Because you're publishing more often. A lot of people have a lot of fear around showing up online or putting their businesses online and talking about what they do. And I think publishing at a more frequent pace helps you to lose some of that fear. And then the second reason for doing it is that in that first year, especially, you're trying to let search engines know what your business is about, what you're an authority in, and what people can come to you for, right? So that's another reason to get out there and just feed the algorithms with what you're known for and what you're about. Once you get through that first year, I think it makes sense to start focusing on creating, as you go forward, more in-depth content. Oftentimes in that first year, as you're publishing on a frequent basis, you maybe don't have time to do additional things. So let's say you have a blog post. You might want to create a blog post that has a video that you embed into the blog post. And maybe you create like a content upgrade, something people can sign up for and download that complements the information that's in the blog post. All of that takes time. So what I recommend is starting in about the second year. And again, this is all like your mileage may vary and it depends, right? It depends on your overall business strategy. But starting in that second year, if you really have published on a more frequent basis, you can dial it back a little bit and start focusing more on content quality. Start really building in rich pieces of content that are multimedia, that have lead magnets, that have all these other ways to keep people engaged. And that doesn't mean you don't do things like that in year one as well, but you probably realistically don't have as much bandwidth. So starting in year two, you can dial it back a little bit and just focus on creating richer content, because theoretically at this point, the algorithms know what you're about. You've established that, and now you can focus on having richer content. Then there's this other life cycle stage that what I have seen, it happens around year 6. So let's say you publish content consistently over time. You've been really, really consistent about getting your content out into the world. Somewhere around year 6, you need to start switching over and becoming what I call a reference librarian. So you can imagine you have this library of content that you built on your site, on your YouTube channel, on your podcast, wherever it is. And at some point, you need to start going back and doing 2 things. You need to update content that's out of date, that has old information that's not accurate anymore. So updating it, maybe republishing it under a new date, for example, with new information, updated information. And then you also need to focus on, like, people come to your site. You have a library full of content. How are you going to help them find what they're looking for? You need to build in things like hierarchy so that people can find what they need. In some cases, even just category pages that put content together and serve as a reference. You can use that kind of table of content structure where you have like a hub and spoke idea. You create like a content topic, and then you have a bunch of pieces of content that branch out from that so that people can really dig in and find themselves lost in your website or lost on your YouTube video or your YouTube channel playlists and things like that. You want to keep them engaged in that way. So it's basically, first year, focus on publishing a ton of content. Somewhere around year 2, focus on publishing richer content. And then somewhere around year 6, start pivoting to, I got to have mercy on people who come to all this content and help them to find what they need and ensure that what they find is actually updated and usable today.
Well, those are all great tips. And how often do you think we need to update our content calendar or editorial calendar, or go into the future, the next month, the next year? What's ideal there in relation to that life cycle?
I really like to plan things out. I think it makes a huge difference. It gives us like peace of mind when we kind of know where we're headed, right? The closer your time frame is, the more nailed down your plan needs to be. So I love to go into an annual plan and say, okay, this year we want to start showing up online and showing up in search engines for these concepts, or showing up on social media for these concepts, or showing, we want people to search TikTok and have us show up as experts in this topic, right? So that's kind of the annual plan, but then you get down to like a quarterly plan, and that's where you can actually go month by month, and in some cases week by week. In order to get to this annual goal, this is what we're going to do this quarter, right? Then on a monthly basis, you're looking at literally day by day. What are we going to put on social? What are we going to publish on our YouTube channel? What podcast episode is going out that week? And how can we make sure that we're telling a kind of cohesive story between all those pieces of content? If you think about it, think about it like a movie premiere, right? There's a new movie coming out, and the studio generally focuses on that big blockbuster they're trying to promote across all their channels. May not be for many months, but oftentimes for a week or 2, it's like all we hear about, right? And that's done very much on purpose. They're trying to make sure that every platform where they appear, they're showing up to talk about that particular blockbuster that they're trying to promote. And we can do the same things as content publishers if we look at all the places that we appear with our content, and we try to make sure that we're all kind of singing from the same songbook, no matter where we are online, no matter where people find us.
Mm-hmm. Speaking of like movie premieres, and that makes me think about, let's say, book launches and product launches and things like that. What would be an example strategy or plan for the run up to, let's say, a book launch?
Book launches and product launches are very different, but they do have some similarities. So one thing that I like to think about is that that launch process has stages as well. So there's kind of the pre-launch stage, and then the live launch stage, and then there's kind of the post-launch stage. So pre-launch, what you want to be talking about is all of the topics that are going to be covered in the book and how those topics impact people in their day-to-day life. So I just started reading this book by Lisa Bragg called Bragging Rights, which is she's got, her last name is Bragg. I mean, gotta love that, right? And she wrote a book called Bragging Rights. And in the run up to that book, she was talking about how people struggle to talk about their accomplishments in a way that helps them to accomplish more in their careers and in their lives, because they just feel like they're bragging, right? They feel uncomfortable about it. And she talked about that from all different angles, so that by the time the book was finally available, you were sort of aware of the issue, and you had already spent a little bit of time thinking about how that issue might impact you and your life and the goals you're trying to accomplish. That's a perfect example of using the time in the lead up to a book launch to just create awareness around the issues that are going to be addressed in the book. Then there's the launch period, which is usually a shorter period of time, but it's like hyper focused on what you're trying to accomplish. In some cases, people want to hit some kind of ranking. They want to get on the New York Times bestseller list. They want to be an Amazon, pick or something like that. So they're very much focused on taking the actions that need to happen so that those accomplishments can be hit. So for example, if somebody wants to appear on Amazon, they're going to really focus on getting testimonials. That may be content marketing via email marketing to a list of people they've built up. Might be social posts, really recommending that people add testimonials or reviews of the book. So that's all, depending on what they're trying to accomplish, the strategy during that book launch week or so is going to be a little bit different. And then there's the post-launch period, which a lot of people, I think, don't really have a plan for. Their plan is like, that's when I'm going to relax and take a breather, right? But if you think about the post-launch as a distinct time period, you're still promoting the book. In the case of a book, it's still available. So you do need to have some kind of strategy for what you're going to be doing on an ongoing basis. And using that as a time where you plan maybe certain promotions at certain points. You talk to people on podcasts to keep the interest and awareness of your book out in the world. You're doing things on an ongoing basis to keep sales up over time.
Gotcha. And have you seen a standout example of the post-launch period done by an author?
There's not a single one that comes to mind, but what I've seen is authors who are really smart about making the most of the pre-launch and launch periods so that they get what they need to be able to do ongoing promotion. And a lot of times that's in the form of reviews. In the pre-launch period, they might be getting book blurbs from very recognizable names, and then they can feature those book blurbs. This Bragging Rights book, she got a blurb from Seth Godin, and Seth is on the cover, right? So I suspect that she's going to be using Seth's quote on an ongoing basis. So that's an example of something that was done in a previous stage of the launch that she's going to be using in the post-launch period. I think figuring out, for example, if you want to hit an Amazon ranking, you push really hard to get that ranking. And then in the post-launch period, you're talking about Amazon, certified Amazon bestseller, or however you want to say it. So I think, there's so many different ways it can go. Some people build a community and they keep engaged with that community. Some people start social media groups, so a LinkedIn group, a Facebook group, where they're continuing to talk about the topic on an ongoing basis. There are lots of ways to do it.
What about a book that maybe becomes dated or obsolete the moment it hits the bookshelves, bookstores, because it's on a topic, let's say like ChatGPT or even content marketing? It's how do you keep a book fresh that has a publication date and work that into your post launch?
Honestly, Stephan, I don't think you should write a book if you think it's going to get dated that quickly. I mean, or not a traditional book. I, I wrote these books on content marketing. I'm actually in the process of updating them right now. They are 7 and 5 years old. Not super old, really, in the realm of books, but they are nonfiction books. Nonfiction books typically do need to get updated with new information. I did my best to make them evergreen, and the bulk of the content in those books is still applicable. But we have this new tool called AI writing, right? And there are lots of ways to use it. And that's what I'm weaving in, and I'll be updating and republishing them in the fall of this year, fall of 2023. So, but if it's the kind of book where the day you publish it, it's going to be out of date, I feel like that information should probably live on a website where it's more easily updated.
Yeah, makes sense. Let's say that you have a very old website with a lot of content. For example, my Marketing Speak podcast has over 400 episodes, has some blog posts as well. Each of those episodes has a long form blog post type show notes page. So I created a Start Here page. And I'm curious to hear, is that kind of common or best practice to have a Start Here page? What are some standout examples, if that is a thing that you would recommend?
Tell me what's on your Start Here page.
So if, let's say somebody's in a particular niche, or they have a particular problem, they might be recommended certain episodes to start with, depending on their role in the company or what they're trying to accomplish.
Okay, so it's broken up so that people can find what they need, it sounds like.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. I think that's a great way to do things. It's a good, I would say, first step. And then the hidden question I'm hearing, and tell me if I'm wrong about this, is you have more than 400 episodes, which congratulations, that's really impressive. And you created long form blog posts to go with the episodes, which is also super smart, because now it's, your podcast is multimedia. It's audio and it's written. So super smart. The hidden question I'm hearing is, what do I do if some of the content is outdated? Am I hearing that right?
Yeah, so that is a great question. Why don't you answer that? That didn't occur to me, but yeah, of course,
Yeah.
that would be.
Well, over that much content, I mean, there's almost a guarantee. So what I recommend that people do when it comes to updating content, especially if you're in a situation where you have like 400 pieces of content to review, that can seem like an impossible mountain to climb, right? And in particular, if you are also publishing new content at the same time, it's like, how am I going to go back and update this old content? I'm trying to keep up with my current publication schedule. I don't have bandwidth, right? So what I recommend people do is to prioritize by first running a report and seeing which content is actually getting views. So if you run a report over a long time period, let's say, 6 months, 300 of those posts have from 0 to 5 views in 6 months, you can probably ignore them, right? But let's say the other 50 are getting some views, and some of them are getting a lot of views. They're getting a lot of hits. People are coming to your website and they're hitting those pieces of content and they're listening to the episodes. They're looking at the show notes. They're spending time with that content. What I would do is take those 50 pieces of content and prioritize them by the ones that are getting the most views to the ones that are getting the least. And then just start tackling that list from the most viewed to the least viewed. And consider the ones that are getting a lot of views that you also discover are out of date. So that's the other thing, is we can't assume that all these pieces of content are out of date. you need to go back and look at them and listen to them and familiarize yourself with them again. Like, what did I cover in this episode? What did I talk about? And this should be easy for you because you have transcripts, you have show notes. This would be a perfect place to use ChatGPT, actually, because you could, now it can look at URLs. So you can actually give it a URL and say, please summarize the main points that are covered in this piece of content. And you could get a really short list and very quickly be able to tell, okay, this one's outdated because I talked about, AMP, or I talked about Google Plus, or like something else that is long gone, right? So if you do that kind of a review and you harness an AI tool to do it, then you'll be able to very quickly prioritize, all right, this one's getting a lot of views, a lot of traffic. It talks about something that doesn't even exist anymore. This is a hot redo opportunity, and I need to put it at the top of my list. So you either, in your case, you could re-record. You could record a new episode and simply replace the old one. I don't know how it works in podcast land, but with written content, you can just redirect the old content to the new and have people go to that versus the old one. That's a way to not lose the traffic. Does that make sense?
It does. I would think that I would need to re-interview the guest.
Or find a new one. If the topic has changed enough and you still want to cover the topic, it doesn't necessarily have to be the same guest. It could be somebody who could speak to that topic.
Right. And how does the hub and spoke model tie into a website like this, where it's, podcast episodes, the topics or the subtopics are different each week, and you have some content getting more dated more quickly than other pieces of content.
Right. I think having a master index of all your content is one of the smartest things a content marketer can do. It could be a spreadsheet, but just having everything in one place, all the podcast episodes, the written content, just having a running list of that. And if you don't have that and you're 400 episodes in, hiring a VA to put that together for you can be an amazing investment because it allows, if we think of ourselves as librarians to our content, it allows you to see what's on the shelves of the library, right? So that you can then respond to it. So that's the first thing, is just having that index. And then in terms of how does a hub and spoke model work, the way to think about it is you in the background have this hub and spoke concept kind of worked out. For example, I want people to come to me to learn how to master this hub topic, this one thing that's in the middle of the wheel, right? And over time, they don't have to be consecutive and they don't have to happen all at once. But over time, these are the spoke concepts that I need to flesh out so that people see me as an authority on this hub topic. So that gives you a plan. It gives you a strategy, like, okay, I'm going to be known for this topic. These are the subtopics I need to flesh out, right? Then on the public facing side of things, you do something like what you've clearly already done. You give people like a start here page or some kind of category page where you say, hey, do you want to learn everything there is to know about this hub topic? Visit these spoke pieces of content and you can learn all about it. Maybe you put it in order. You say, start with this piece and then move to this and this and this. And you can even interlink between those to make that easy. So you can say, people get to the end of the first piece of content and you say, listen to the next one, listen to the next one. And you just keep them moving along. Does that make sense?
It does. It kind of breaks the model that most websites, at least those that are running on WordPress, follow, which is category pages based on reverse chronological order, and then maybe 10 per page, and then you get a pagination series of,
yes.
Let's say it's
Here's
dozens
a
of pages.
Yeah, totally. And there's, there's a place for that. I'm not convinced that the user actually finds that terribly useful. I think, again, if we give ourselves the title of librarian to our content, what we're doing is facilitating. So the category pages are the equivalent of sending someone to a computer database of all the books you have on a topic, right? And there's nothing wrong with that, but it kind of puts the onus on the user to figure out like what they need and in what order. If you create a page where you've done some of that thinking for them, and as the topic expert, you should be able to do this, right? You sit down and look at all your content and you say, hey, if you really want to master this, this is the content that I can help you with. This is what I can provide for you. I have a really good example page that I created on my own website that's all about how to start and build an online business. And that's what I've done. I've taken all my content, I put it into business stages. I've helped people to identify what stage they're in now. And then I've given them pieces of content to help them with that particular stage and the kinds of issues they'll come up against in that stage. That's a good example. I can send you a link to that if you want to see it.
Yeah, that'd be great. And I'll include that in the show notes for this episode.
Awesome. Yeah, it's a good example because it's graphic heavy. It embeds a quiz so that people can take it and understand where they are and what they may need. It gives the resources all there on the page. And it's all woven in with things that I offer. So it's an example of using a kind of a start here page, but giving it a business benefit, making it a way that you can bring in leads for something that you sell.
Yeah, you mentioned quiz. Are you big on quizzes? I just interviewed Ryan Levesque.
He's big on quizzes.
He's very big on quizzes.
Yeah.
So I'm curious where you're sitting in that.
I love them. And I mean, I think they kind of had this big moment a few years ago, and people aren't quite as excited about them as maybe they used to be, but I think there's a place for them. And I think the more you can promise some kind of a tangible outcome for giving people a quiz to do, like, think about it, Stephan. When we were in school and the teacher said, we have a quiz today, was that ever good news for you? It wasn't for me. Yeah, like we have a quiz class, get ready, get your pencils out. And that was never good news. So I think there's a place for quizzes, but I think we need to promise some kind of a result. Take this quiz, tell people how long it's going to take, or how many questions, 8 questions, and you'll understand after you take this quiz, you'll understand this, or you'll get this result, or you'll benefit in some way, and spell that out. You have to kind of sell the quiz, in my opinion. But I think there's a place for them for sure.
And do you have a lot of quizzes on your site?
I don't have a lot. I wouldn't say a lot. I have a few, and they're in kind of strategic places. Probably the most important one right now is that quiz I just told you about. It's called the Focus Finder quiz, and it helps people to figure out. The thing is, when you're learning online business and you're trying to learn online business online, you have this fire hose of information that you have to try to navigate through and try to deal with, right? And people are like, should I be doing a quiz? Should I create a webinar? Should I get on TikTok? Like, they don't know what to do, right? So that Focus Finder quiz helps people to figure out, depending on what stage you're in, this is what you should probably focus on now. And you should ignore the rest of it. And that I say that in the quiz, like there are 4 main stages of building an online business. And you can ignore the 3 that you are not in right now. So just ignore information that has to do with any of these other 3 stages and just focus on the stage you're in and getting through the most important milestones in that stage. So that's the most important one on my site right now. I'll definitely send you a link so people can check it out.
Yeah, awesome. And to create that quiz, did you use Interact or some other tool?
It's in Interact now. It was originally in Typeform, and it's now in Interact. So I don't think the tool is that important, to be honest. It's more important to think through the questions and answers, the main benefit that you're going to deliver to people, and then how you can set it up with some kind of conditional logic, which most quiz software allows you to do some kind of conditional logic, so that when people are answering, you are changing what they see next so that it's particularly pertinent to them and not showing them things that don't actually apply.
Yeah. Yeah, makes sense. Cool. And what about other kinds of kind of related to a quiz, maybe a personality test or assessment, self-assessment type of thing, something that's a little more elegant or more involved than just a typical quiz?
I think there can be a place for those as well. The big thing that I recommend to people, though, is that they don't lead with the tool that they want to use, but they think about strategy first and then go to the available tools to see which tool will help them to meet the strategy goals that they have in mind. A lot of people get excited about a tool. They want to figure out a way to use it. They want to figure out a way to weave it in, and they let the tool lead. And I think that's a mistake. I think we have to figure out what we're trying to accomplish first and then go looking for tools.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. We don't want the tail wagging the dog.
Exactly.
Yeah, yeah. Now you have a lot of content on PamelaWilson.com. Do you find it challenging to figure out whether it should get posted there or on a third-party site, maybe an online magazine, or do you have a model where you create two versions? Like Andy Crestodina has this evil twin strategy where he does one version for his blog or website. Let's say the 10 best practices of the leading whatever in the topic space, and then he does a flip of that where it's the 10 biggest mistakes or worst practices of the newbies in this particular topic space, and it's all based on the same research. So one goes on his blog and the other goes on a third-party site that maybe has a requirement that it's unique content that's not published elsewhere.
Right. I love Andy. By the way, you're bringing up one of my favorite people. So
he's awesome. And he's been a guest on this podcast.
And leave it to Andy to come up with a title like the evil twin strategy. That's so awesome. I think that's a great strategy. I have not used it myself. I've always focused on making my website really robust and have not explored publishing on a second platform. That would be a great use for AI, though. Getting a basic rewrite, first draft of a rewrite done that would be different enough from the original that you could then go in and take that first draft rewrite, the AI version of the rewrite, and go in and smooth it out and add the human touch. That would be a great use of an AI tool. I think it's a great strategy. And honestly, if Andy Crestodina is recommending it, I think it's probably pretty sound.
Awesome. All right. Well, I know we're about out of time. I'm curious, are you active on TikTok, and do you see a lot of opportunity there or not?
I'm not currently. The content team I'm managing is, though, and I do see opportunity. I mean, it's amazing to me that TikTok is a viable platform for the healthcare industry, but it is. So I do see opportunity.
Awesome. Well, maybe you'll be on there in a more active capacity yourself. Who knows?
Who knows? Yeah, who knows?
Yeah. In the meantime, where do we send our listener or visitor if they're interested in learning more from you and working with you and all that?
The best place to learn more about what I do is on my website, PamelaWilson.com. There's lots of good stuff on the homepage. They can use it as a taking off point for all the things they can find on my site. And that page that I mentioned, I'll send you a link to that, and they can check out that quiz we talked about. So it's all there.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Pamela. And thank you, listener. Apply this stuff in your business, on your website, in your social media, and we'll catch you in the next episode. I'm your host, Stephan Spencer, signing off.